Hi, I'm Cherry's girlfriend asking you if it's okay that to check out the description down below and click the link to Cherry's Shopee account. It will really help this channel if you purchase stuff from Cherry's Shopee account. So please take a quick look and don't hesitate to buy some toys, second-hand items, and all sorts of ukay-ukay. Now enough with the plug, let's get back to the video.
This is my very first podcast. I've never done a podcast in my life. Honestly, I'm just getting bored, and I want to spice things up in my relationship with my beautiful girlfriend. So I decided to start a little podcast, to get something rolling in my relationship with my girlfriend and help her, get social, talk, and express her feelings because she has a hard time expressing her feelings. She's a shy little girl. So maybe if we did a podcast together, we can make something happen. Now, I was initially supposed to shoot a podcast on the 28th, but I got dropped this podcast bomb on the 26th. So I'm right now here on the 27th of March making a podcast. This is so out of the blue. I am very, very unprepared. And honestly, I am nervous. I honestly hope that you do not get murderous with me on the comments down below. Please, by the way, subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Cherry Show, for more of the madness. Hopefully, I can get to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours and see myself get monetized. Because that is the dream, really, for any YouTuber right now, to get monetized, especially right now with the pandemic. By the way, on March 29, the Philippines and the National Capital Region, NCR, Metro Manila is included in this, by the way. It's all going to be under ECQ. ECQ means Enhanced Community Quarantine. This is where that you have to stay at home as much as possible, have zero contact whatsoever with people, less traveling, more travel restrictions, you have a curfew, stay clean, stay safe, and stay away from people as much as possible. Wear face masks, get your hand sanitizers on, wear a face shield, the drill. That's what the ECQ is all about. Expect lockdowns eventually with the rising cases and the rising deaths of the coronavirus here in the Philippines. So yeah, this is my very first episode of the Cherry Show podcast. I don't know. I don't really have a name for this. Anyway, so let's talk about Myanmar. Here's a news article that I got from usnews.com about America and Britain blacklisting Myanmar military-controlled companies. The U.S. Treasury Department said its sanctions targeted Myanmar Economic Holdings Public Company Ltd. and Myanmar Economic Corporation Ltd., citing the Myanmar military's serious human rights violations against Rohingya Muslims. Representatives of the two entities which control big sections of the Myanmar economy had no immediate comment on when Reuters reported on Wednesday the sanctions were expected. Thursday's actions were the most significant by far against the business interests of Myanmar's military, which range from beer and cigarettes to telecommunications, tires, mining, and real estate. Shortly after the announcement, the State Department condemned continued use of lethal force by authorities in Myanmar over the weekend that resulted in the deaths of at least 27 people, including several children. These abhorrent and brutal acts against children, one as young as 7 years old who was shot and killed in her home while sitting on her father's lap, further demonstrate the horrific nature of the Burmese military regime's assault on its own people, Department spokesperson Ned Price said in a statement. Washington's move freezes any assets held by the entities in the United States and is the latest in a series of sanctions following the military takeover that have targeted Myanmar's central bank as well as top generals. The designation prohibits American companies or citizens from trading or conducting financial transactions with those listed. Since almost all dollar payments clear through U.S. financial institutes, the move effectively kicks blacklisted companies out of the American banking system. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the Myanmar military have taken increasingly disturbing actions aimed at their own citizens since February 1. These actions will specifically target those who led the coup, the economic interests of the military, and the funding stream supporting the Burmese military brutal repression. He said they are not directed at the people of Burma. The United States and the United Kingdom have shown that we will follow through on our pledges to promote accountability for the coup and the abhorrent violence and other abuses we have seen in recent weeks, Blinken said. At a U.S. Senate hearing, Senator Ed Markey, Democratic chairman of the Asia Subcommittee, said he welcomed the latest sanctions but called for more. More must be done to deny the army its economic lifeline and to deny it the weapons of war. The United States should play a leading role in urging our partners and allies, including members of ASEAN, to take steps to cut off funding for the military, he said, referring to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Human rights groups welcomed the U.S. move but also urged more steps. Human Rights Watch said the sanctions would create significant difficulties for the conglomerates in doing business with outside companies. This is a very important step, but it is not the biggest economic sanction that could be implemented, said the group's Asia Advocacy Director John Siffin, adding that Washington should also target Myanmar's revenues from natural gas joint ventures with international companies. Global Witness urged the European Union to also impose sanctions on the military's business interests and said Britain should follow the United States in targeting MEC. In announcing the sanctions, the United States issued several licenses providing exceptions for official U.S. government transactions and those of international and non-government organizations. One license authorized transactions necessary to wind down business involving MEC and MEHL or any entity they own until June 22. This was reported by David Brunstrom, Susan Heavy, Humayra Pamuk, Daphne Paladakis, Alexandra Alper, Patricia Sengurli, Simon Lewis, and the editing was by Mohammed Zargam and Jonathan Otis. I can hardly read all these names correctly. I am very, very sorry if I get your names wrong. Here's a quick fun fact about me. I actually have a reading disability. I have reading comprehension problems, and I'm not really fond of reading stuff because it is hard for me to learn that way. I'm more of experienced person. I learn better with experience. So if I get your name wrong, I'm terribly sorry. I will try to do better. I'm just really trying to grasp the situation that Myanmar has right now and the world has right now with Myanmar. From what I understand, it is a very, very messy situation in Myanmar. Lots of guns, lots of political power, lots of drugs. We'll get to that later. And lots of women and children involved. And it is not right. It is absolutely horrifying, to say the very least. Myanmar is not exactly a place to be. Here's my take on UK and America sanctioning Myanmar with these sanctions for less legitimate income to go to Myanmar's ruling political party and financing Myanmar's militarization in the country. Myanmar's income is not generated by Myanmar Economic Holdings Public Economy Ltd and Myanmar Economic Corporation Ltd. Myanmar's money is not coming from those two companies. In my opinion, the money, per se, like where the money really is at, it's in Myanmar's drug game, honestly. Before I read out the article from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, here's an idea of Myanmar's drug game. Myanmar is the world's second largest producer of illicit opium after Afghanistan and has been a major player in the world drug trade since around 1939, I think. The Golden Triangle is where the borders of Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar meet for the drugs. The Golden Triangle is an approximate 950 square kilometers area that overlaps the mountains of the three adjacent countries. Myanmar's drug game is politically influenced and heavily protected by what I understand are pro-government militias. These pro-government militias are financed by money made from selling the drugs to the world and are led by members of Myanmar's ruling party. The reason why China has a lot of opium from Myanmar at one point is because Myanmar's opium cultivation only expanded around the time that the Chinese Communist Party decided to not support the cultivation of opium in their country. When you get caught with opium in China, you can be sentenced to death or get your hand cut off and some weird stuff that I don't want to expand about because, well, I'm not from China. This is why all the drugs that were once being planted in China has moved its production to Myanmar. Here's an update on the drug trade in Myanmar according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. The report titled Myanmar Opium Survey, Cultivation, Production, and Implications highlight the downward trend that started in 2015 has continued and confirms that opium farmers are experiencing declining incomes amidst the disruption in trade that has accompanied the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Opium-dependent regions and communities are being impacted by the changes in the drug economy, says the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Country Manager for Myanmar, Benedict Hoffman. He continued, alternative development programs that offer viable, sustainable sources of legitimate income and assistance to communities in Shan and Kachin are critical to the country's future. Prior to COVID-19, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime estimates suggest that opium farmers in Myanmar earned less than 10% of the money generated by the country's opiate economy. An estimated 405 metric tons of opium were produced in Myanmar in 2020, representing less than half of the estimate of 2013, while the area of opium poppy cultivation declined by 11% from 33,000 in 2019 to 29,000 hectares. As in previous years, the majority of opium continues to be cultivated in northern Myanmar Shan state, accounting for 84% of the total opium poppy cultivation area in 2020, followed by Kachin state at 12%, with both decreasing by 12% and 6% respectively from 2019. Areas with opium cultivation in Kaya and Shin states accounted for 4% of the total. In spite of the continuing shift towards synthetic drugs, organized crime groups that traffic heroin in Southeast Asia generate substantial profits from the business. Latest findings from 2020 show that domestic heroin consumption of 6 tons was valued at 144 to 315 million American dollars, while the export of heroin from Myanmar to neighboring countries was worth between 0.5 to 1.6 billion American dollars locally. Heroin also continues to pose a significant public security and health challenge for neighboring countries as Myanmar remains the major supplier of opium and heroin in East and Southeast Asia, as well as Australia. According to the latest estimates, there are more than 300 million heroin users in the region, consuming approximately 10 billion American dollars worth of the drug annually. The report also warns that the interplay between opium cultivation, heroin production, and the illicit drug economy has had a clear impact on the conflict situation in Myanmar and the establishment of long-term peace and stability. There is a long-standing connection between drugs and conflict in Myanmar, and any meaningful action to address the conflict will require breaking this cycle, noted Jeremy Douglas, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Regional Representative for Southeast Asia and the Pacific. He added the money generated has fueled corrosive political economy and continued militarization. It is clear the poor opium farming areas require better security and sustainable economic alternatives. The fact is that opium and heroin still remain an important source of income for organized crime, even as the production of methamphetamine and other synthetic drugs has again increased. It is important to develop strategies to address the overall drug economy. Honestly, I don't understand why is Myanmar's ruling political party doing what it's doing. I mean, it is easy to assume that it's because of money, it's because of power, it's because of keeping the social triangle to the favor of the rich. Honestly, that's all I can really assume. I don't really understand what is the motives of the ruling Myanmar party. That all I know is it's not only going to affect the people in Myanmar, it's also going to affect the world per se. It's already affected places like Thailand, Australia, and China, I wouldn't be shocked if it's also affecting the Philippines. I understand that ASEAN does not want to meddle with the affairs of Myanmar, but the thing is, Myanmar's situation is already affecting the world, and it's definitely affecting the world's economy in a very, very bad way. If Myanmar's ruling party and Myanmar's militarization does not stop, the world will be continuously well supplied with drugs. And of course, drugs is bad. Do not take drugs. What I feel is the most important thing to do right now is a change of leadership, really. The problem with Myanmar is that all of this is mostly politically driven and politically influenced. It starts with a change of leadership, honestly, and then demilitarization. All the fundings for the pro-government militia has to go. The Golden Triangle, it has to be bordered. It has to be in constant watch. Honestly, I think United Nations should consider having its own army. I don't know. Somebody with a kind heart has to go to the Golden Triangle to take them out. I'm not saying that you take them out by shooting at them, but you gotta take them out of the equation. It may seem harsh, but, well, you gotta strike fear into the criminal's heart to make sure that they don't do bad stuff with a sack of drugs. Honestly, the Golden Triangle, that's a good place to start to destroy the drug game in Myanmar. Go to the Golden Triangle, blockade that area, and make sure that no drugs get in there. The financing of militarization in Myanmar starts from the drug trade. Myanmar Economic Holdings Public Company Limited and Myanmar Economic Corporation Limited are two major companies in Myanmar that funds the militarization in Myanmar. These are just good companies, in my opinion, to launder the drug money that is earned through the opium trade, the heroin trade, and all sorts of illegal drugs trade in Myanmar. If you take out those two companies and blacklist them, I feel that this is just a major step, not necessarily a life-changing step or a game-changing step, but it is a big step as it is and as it stands to make sure that Myanmar does not launder more drug money into legal businesses and have legitimate income to fund the militarization, the guns, and all of the wrongdoings of the Myanmar ruling party. This is, however, not enough. It is big, it is major, but it is not game-changing, it is not life-changing. The Golden Triangle is still there. The opium farms are still there. Myanmar is still a leading opium contributor to Southeast Asia, including Australia. What needs to happen is more blacklisting of all forms of trade from Myanmar in all over the world, because there are still international companies that still work with Myanmar, and there is hush-hush business happening in Myanmar, and international companies and international businesses that continue funding the militarization in Myanmar. That needs to stop. We need a change of perspectives, we need a change of leadership, and we need a change of education, because honestly, I'm not going to put all the blame on the Myanmar ruling party or the Myanmar pro-government militias. The government can own Myanmar all they want, but Myanmar is just Myanmar. It's just land. It's just dirt. If you have a government and it rules over no people at all, it's not going to exactly be a country, because the country is not the government. The country is the people. It's important that the people realize that they have power to change things. They have power to make decisions. They have power to enforce their will and make the government work for them rather than the people work for the government. The government is nothing without the people. That's my final thoughts right there. Okay, so that's the end of my podcast. Thank you very much for listening to my very, very first podcast. I'm so nervous right now. If you like my podcast, please hit the like button down below and give me your thoughts about my very first podcast on Myanmar, Myanmar's ruling party, the Myanmar pro-government militia, United Kingdom and America, banning those two companies of Myanmar, funding Myanmar's militia. Let me know your thoughts all about it. I would love to hear your thoughts about it on the comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can stay updated and see when the next podcast drops. The next podcast that's going to drop is me and my girlfriend. We're going to be doing the next podcast together, and we are going to give our thoughts about Star Wars 4. It's going to be absolutely crazy. I was actually supposed to do this podcast with somebody. I think his name is Alberto, but I couldn't get a hold of him, so whatever. I'm gonna have to fly solo on this and talk about Myanmar Economic Holdings Public Company Limited and Myanmar Economic Corporation Limited getting the blacklist by the United States of America and the United Kingdom in this podcast all by myself. I'm going to list down all my resources on the description down below. Please check out the resources that I've taken in the internet for more information about Myanmar and all their drug dealings and the blacklisting and how bad it is in Myanmar right now. I would appreciate it that you check out the last link at the description down below and check out my Shopee account. My Shopee account is loaded with all sorts of cool stuff that you can gift to your friends, and it helps support this channel if you buy from my Shopee account.
Jerry, bang, bang.